The 30th of January, 1933, Germany. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany and aims to lead the German master race to victory in the racial struggle against those deemed as inferior peoples, especially the Jews. Propaganda campaigns that demonize Jews create an atmosphere tolerant of violence against them and serve to prepare the German population for harsher measures, such as mass deportations and eventually genocide. The propaganda ministry is led by Joseph Goebbels, whose wife, as Hitler remains unmarried until the end of his life, takes on the propagandistically significant position of First Lady, representing the Third Reich at receptions, balls, and state visits. Despite being fully aware of all the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime, she will never stop publicly supporting Hitler and will remain loyal to the Nazi regime until its bitter end, even killing her own 6 children. Her name is Magda Goebbels. Magda Goebbels, the daughter of an unmarried Catholic maid, was born as Johanna Maria Magdalena Ritzel on the 11th of November 1901 in Berlin, then part of the German Empire. Magda's father was Oskar Ritzel, a rich building contractor who married her mother Augusta Behrendt shortly after their daughter's birth. However, they divorced 3 years later. In 1908, Augusta married Richard Friedlander, a wealthy Jewish merchant working in Brussels, who adopted Magda and gave her his surname. Magda grew up in a bourgeois atmosphere, and in Brussels she was enrolled in the Ursuline convent, where she received the basics of her excellent education and was remembered as an active and intelligent little girl. After the outbreak of the First World War, which began on the 28th of July 1914, the Friedlander family left Belgium. The same year, Magda's mother divorced Richard Friedlander. However, thanks to the support of her father Oskar Ritzel, Magda was able to continue attending a boarding school for girls. During her school years, Magda fell in love with Viktor Chaim Arlosorov, who was the brother of her classmate. Magda became familiar with the Jewish faith in the Arlosorov family and wore the Star of David on a chain around her neck. She accompanied Arlosorov to Jewish youth club meetings and even briefly considered emigrating with him to the British-ruled Palestine. However, they broke up and he left for Palestine in 1924. In February 1920, on a train journey to Goslar, Magda, sitting in a reserved first-class compartment, met the industrialist Günther Quandt, who was twice her age. Quandt, one of the richest industrialists in Germany, fell in love with Magda, and the two became engaged on the 28th of July 1920, his 39th birthday. However, when converting from Catholicism to Quandt's Protestantism, he demanded that Magda change her surname back to Ritzel, because he considered Friedlander, the surname of her stepfather, Jewish-sounding. Magda and Günther got married on the 4th of January 1921, and their son, Harald, was born in November the same year. While Günther was building his business empire, Magda was responsible for bringing up Harald, as well as the 2 children from Günther Quandt's first marriage, whose mother had died in 1918, and the 3 children of a deceased friend. While the marriage opened the door for Magda to unlimited wealth and social connections, she was not happy, as her need for a cultural and social life with lavish parties did not match the lifestyle of her older husband. Günther and Magda became increasingly estranged, and when he found out in May 1928 that she was cheating on him with a student, he threw her out of his house with nothing. However, Magda did find a way to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. When she threatened to publish compromising letters that Quandt had received from other women, he offered her a generous settlement of 50,000 Reichsmarks for a new apartment, 20,000 Reichsmarks for cases of illness, 4,000 Reichsmarks as a monthly payment, and continued free use of the Quandt estate in Severin. She also received custody of their son Harold. They divorced in the summer of 1929, and from the payments, she was able to afford a luxurious apartment in Berlin, as well as a nanny and a cook. Magda was young and independent, but also bored. On the 30th of August 1930, she attended a meeting of the Nazi Party, where she was impressed by one of the speakers, Joseph Goebbels, then the Gauleiter of Berlin. Magda joined the party on the 1st of September 1930 and did some volunteer work, although she has not been characterized as politically active. From the local branch, Magda moved to the party headquarters in Berlin. Soon after, she was in charge of Joseph Goebbels' private archive, collecting and organizing newspaper articles about him from the domestic and foreign press, using her language skills to her advantage. She and Goebbels became romantically involved while on a short trip with friends to Weimar in February 1931. At that time, Goebbels was still in an unhappy relationship with her childhood sweetheart, who was, according to later Nazi racial legislation, half Jewish, and Magda also had a parallel, intimate relationship with a student, her lover from the time of her marriage to Quandt. According to Goebbels' diaries, this repeatedly led to fierce arguments from the very beginning. Nevertheless, by April 1931, they began making plans for their future together. In the fall of 1931, Magda met Adolf Hitler in person over tea at the Hotel Kaiserhof in Berlin. That same evening, Hitler said, "This woman could play a major role in my life, even without me being married to her." Hitler developed a friendly relationship with Magda, of whom he was very fond. Magda and Hitler often spent time together without Joseph Goebbels, sometimes for days at a time. Though it is not known whether the relationship between the two was also intimate at times, it was Hitler whose judgment about a possible wedding was decisive for both future spouses. Magda and Joseph got married on the 19th of December 1931 at the estate in Severin, which belonged to her ex-husband Quandt, who knew nothing about the wedding. Goebbels was excommunicated from the Catholic Church for marrying a Protestant, who was also divorced. Adolf Hitler was the best man, and Magda's son Harold, then 10 years old, attended the ceremony in his Hitler Youth uniform. Between 1932 and 1940, Magda and Joseph Goebbels had 6 children each, with names starting with H in honor of Hitler: Helga, Hilde, Helmut, Holde, Hedda, and Heide. When Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power on the 30th of January 1933, Magda took on the propagandistically significant position of First Lady. She represented the Third Reich at receptions, balls, and state visits. This was because Adolf Hitler's relationship with Eva Braun was kept secret until their death, and Hitler had created a public image of a celibate man, dedicated entirely to Nazi Germany with no domestic life. Stylized as a supermother by Nazi propaganda, Magda Goebbels was a role model for German women during the National Socialist era, receiving letters from all over Germany from women with questions about domestic matters or child custody issues. However, contrary to what was portrayed, Magda Goebbels herself took little care of her children. This task was usually taken on by nannies and governesses, while Magda was often away from home for weeks at a time. In 1938, she had her children's lives filmed. They were portrayed as pure Aryan children. In contrast, images of disabled and therefore worthless children in the sense of Nazi ideology were shown. Though the Goebbels family was the model family of the Third Reich, in the course of 1935 at the latest, Magda found out about her husband's various fleeting affairs, especially with young female artists from the radio and film industry. She initially tried to tolerate this, but drowned her sorrows with excessive alcohol consumption at times. It was only when her husband declared in the summer of 1938 that he loved the Czech actress, Lida Barova, and asked his wife to have a 3-way marriage, that she complained to Hitler about her husband's behavior. When Magda asked Hitler for permission to divorce her husband, the Führer stepped in. While Joseph Goebbels was determined to maintain his relationship with Barova at the beginning of the talks, in which Hermann and Emmy Goering also took part, Hitler, who was very fond of Magda and the Goebbels' young children, decided that Goebbels had to separate from Barova in a telephone conversation supervised by Goering and stop the affair at once. Joseph Goebbels complied, and Barova then fled to Prague. Afterwards, Hitler arranged for publicity photos to be taken of himself with a reconciled couple in October 1938. What is noteworthy is that at this time, Magda Goebbels herself was cheating on her husband with his state secretary, Karl Hanke. Joseph Goebbels asked Hanke to act as a mediator with Magda on his behalf, but Hanke became her lover instead. Hanke later enlisted, or had to enlist as a soldier at the beginning of the war, as the continuation of his work as state secretary in the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, for which Magda's husband was responsible, was, due to his private entanglements, no longer considered acceptable. It was Magda who had confessed to her husband about the affair with Hanke. Though Magda was raised by her Jewish stepfather and was in love with a Jewish man, she turned a blind eye to the persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany. In June 1938, Richard Friedlander, Magda's stepfather, once a rich man, now an impoverished Jew, was deported to the Buchenwald concentration camp, where he was put to forced labor in a stone quarry. Friedlander died in February 1939, and his death certificate listed the cause of death as heart muscle failure. There is no evidence that Magda attempted to intervene to save her stepfather. Instead, she kept publicly supporting Hitler and the Nazi Party. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939. Magda Goebbels and her children once again put themselves at the service of propaganda. Magda lived up to the image of a patriotic mother by training as a Red Cross nurse and working with the electronics company Telefunken. She traveled to work on a bus, like her colleagues, and was also involved with entertaining the wives of foreign heads of state, supporting the troops, and comforting war widows. While the marriage appeared to be harmonious again, Goebbels increasingly withdrew from his family. In August 1943, due to the air raids on Berlin, Magda moved with the children to their country house, which in turn made it easier for her husband, who continued having various relationships, including with actresses dependent on him, to live out his inclinations in his Berlin homes. As the war situation became increasingly hopeless, Magda Goebbels frequently fell ill and was admitted to a sanatorium for several days at the beginning of 1944. Probably because she knew about the Holocaust and other Nazi crimes, she also suffered from severe depression and trigeminal neuralgia, a condition which affects a nerve in the face, and although usually harmless, is considered to cause intense pain and can be notoriously hard to treat. This often left her bedridden and led to bouts of hospitalization as late as August 1944. Especially after the war began to go badly in the Eastern Front, privately, Magda expressed doubts about Hitler. On the 9th of November 1942, during a gathering with friends listening to a speech by Hitler, she switched off the radio exclaiming, "My God, what a lot of rubbish." In 1944, she reportedly said of Hitler, "He no longer listens to voices of reason. Those who tell him what he wants to hear are the only ones he believes." When she was asked about her husband's antisemitism, she answered, "The Führer wants it thus, and Joseph must obey." However, when she learned of the assassination attempt on Hitler on the 20th of July 1944, she is said to have suffered a nervous breakdown, and on the phone, she swore her eternal loyalty to him and declared her willingness to die for him if the Russians are in Berlin. She kept her word. On the 20th of April, 1945, on Hitler's birthday, the First Belarusian Front, led by Marshal Georgy Zhukov, advancing from the east and north, started shelling Berlin's city center, while Marshal Ivan Konev's First Ukrainian Front broke through the army group center and advanced towards the southern suburbs of Berlin. 2 days later, on the 22nd of April 1945, Goebbels' family, including 6 children between the ages of 4 and 12, moved into Hitler's bunker under the Reich Chancellery Garden. She refused several offers, such as one by Albert Speer, to have her children smuggled out of Berlin, and insisted that the family must stay at her husband's side. In the Führer bunker, she confided to Hitler's secretary, Traudl Junge, saying, "I would rather have my children die than live in disgrace," jeered at. "My children stand no chance in Germany after the war." This is also confirmed by Elo Quandt, Magda's friend and sister-in-law from her first marriage, to whom Magda said, "We have demanded monstrous things from the German people, treated other nations with pitiless cruelty. For this, the victors will exact their full revenge. We can't let them think we are cowards. Everybody else has the right to live. We haven't got this right. We have forfeited it. I make myself responsible. I belonged. I believed in Hitler, and for long enough in Joseph Goebbels. Suppose I remain alive. I should immediately be arrested and interrogated about Joseph. If I tell the truth, I must reveal what sort of man he was, must describe all that happened behind the scenes. Then, any respectable person would turn from me in disgust. It would be equally impossible to do the opposite. That is, to defend what he has done, to justify him to his enemies, to speak up for him out of true conviction. It would be quite impossible for me to go on living. We will take the children with us. They are too good, too lovely for the world which lies ahead. In the days to come, Joseph will be regarded as one of the greatest criminals that Germany has ever produced. His children would hear that said daily. People would torment them, despise, and humiliate them. You know, I told you at the time, quite frankly, what the Führer said in Munich when he saw the little Jewish boy. You remember that he would like to squash him flat like a bug on a wall. I couldn't believe it, and thought it was just provocative talk, but he really did it later. Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide on the 30th of April, 1945. Magda and Joseph decided to follow them with their children on the following day, stating that their children would support the decision to commit suicide if they were old enough to speak for themselves. On the evening of the 1st of May, 1945, Magda ordered the SS dentist Helmut Kunz to inject her 6 children, dressed in long white nightgowns, with morphine to make them unconscious. After that, Magda Goebbels, with the help of Ludwig Stumpfegger, Hitler's personal surgeon, crushed an ampule of cyanide into each of their mouths. Once she had murdered her own 6 children, Magda and Joseph walked up the stairs to the garden of the Chancellery, where they committed suicide. After Joseph shot the 43-year-old Magda and himself, their bodies were doused with petrol and burned. The charred corpses were found on the afternoon of the 2nd of May 1945 by Soviet troops. Magda's face was unrecognizable compared to that of her husband, and her jawbones and dental remains were found detached in the oral cavity. Their children were found in the bunker, dressed in their nightclothes, with ribbons tied in the girl's hair. The remains of the Goebbels family were repeatedly buried and exhumed, and in April 1970, a Soviet KGB team exhumed, then burned, crushed, and scattered their remains from the boxes into the Bideritz River, a tributary of the nearby Elbe. However, Harold Quandt, Magda's son from her first marriage, did survive the war. Harold and his older half-brother Herbert Quandt ran the industrial empire left to them by their father, Günther Quandt, owning a stake mainly in Germany's luxury car manufacturer, BMW. While the Quandts belong to the richest family in Germany today, Magda Goebbels will forever be remembered as a mother who killed her own 6 children, and was a woman who represented the Nazi regime, responsible for the murder of millions of people, until its bitter end. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.